Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Lamp in the Library. I'm Graham.
I'm Kim.
And today we're going to be talking about judging a book by its cover, which you're told that you should not do, but let's face it, we all do it, especially when you're buying a book. You want it to have a really nice cover. So we're going to talk about the instances where the cover made the difference in purchasing the book. I think under competition from ebooks, book publishers realized in the past few years that they really had to step it up in terms of art direction and cover art, and I think they have done so. Book covers now are better than they were in past decades, and I think that's a great thing, because just like vinyl, people are realizing the value of having a book collection in their houses. So we're going to talk about those books that have fantastic covers, and we will be judging books by their covers in this episode.
So I'm going to go first, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about a book that's kind of popular on BookTube lately and just is getting a lot of attention, and that's Hamnet. And what's interesting about this edition is that we live in Canada, and when I was hearing a bit about this book Hamnet, I was interested and I wanted to check it out for myself. But for one thing, it was out in the UK before it was out in Canada, and I decided maybe I'll see if I can pre-order it. And when I went online, I saw the Canadian edition's cover, and I thought it was just really ugly, and it literally made me not want to even really read the book. Just the style of it was like, oh, I don't really know if I want to read that book. And they even changed the title of the book slightly, and they call it Hamnet and Judith. Now, for those who may not be aware, the book Hamnet is about Shakespeare's son Hamnet. He got the bubonic plague, he caught it, and he passed away from it. And it's a little bit about the story of how Hamnet and his twin sister Judith both caught the plague, and Hamnet's the one that passed away from it. But it's actually more of a focus on Shakespeare's wife, and just sort of trying to flesh out who was this woman, what happened after she lost her son, and her husband, who's this playwright, is never home. He's always in the city in London, and just an imagining of what her life was like and who she was. And I did find it an interesting read for anyone who may be interested in Hamnet. I didn't love it. I read it pretty quickly, and there were parts where I felt like it was dragging a bit, the narrative for me, but overall in the end I did like it. I wouldn't say I loved it, but I still really wanted to read it, and the only way I was going to read it is if I had this nice cover, because I thought the art on this edition is beautiful. So I actually ordered it from the UK because it was the only way that I could get this cover.
It's interesting that different countries have different covers, obviously, and I think the author, I don't know the degree to which they have a say in the cover art, because the publisher, depending on the publisher obviously, has a responsibility to market the book and get it out into the world. So especially if you have different editions in different countries, you're going to have very different cover art, because you're probably going to have different publishers and distributors, etc. So I really wonder the degree to which any author has power over the cover art of their books.
Yeah, and it must be a little hard, because when you get a really ugly cover, it can have a pretty big impact on if the book sells and catches people's attention. And then also with that, I really wondered, why was the Canadian cover so different from this cover? And why did they choose to change the name slightly too? Why is it no longer called Hamnet and called Hamnet and Judith? And if you didn't know anything about the book yet, and you just sort of looked at the cover with this woman on it and it's saying Hamnet and Judith, you might get a really wrong impression of what the book is until you read the back, but still.
Well, I'm going to focus on one of my favorite authors, Ursula Le Guin, and I always wanted to read her Earthsea fantasy series because they're very well regarded, very well reviewed. People love them. But every time I tried to seek out these books, I found the cover art so off-putting because it was clearly marketed towards a youth or YA audience with a lot of these covers, especially post Harry Potter, when they're clearly marketing these books toward the audience for the Harry Potter books, because there's a lot of kind of touchstones in the way that the Harry Potter books were marketed. So I never read these books until I went to this used bookstore, and I found this copy of the book for $4. And the cover art, there was actually 2 copies there, and one was like the really childish book cover, and the other was, it was just this depiction of, you know, water and islands.
You can actually see it in our video about our July book haul, because you talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. So I read this book in a weekend and absolutely loved it, and I'm actually mad at myself for not picking this book up earlier. This is a fantastic, absolutely wonderful book written in 1968. Timeless. It can be read by any age. The themes are universal. I think that it's one of those books that you can pick up at various stages in your life and get new meaning from it. Absolutely fantastic. So now I'm obsessed with these books, and thankfully I think someone at a publisher realized that the book covers of these books were not to the standard of the writing. So I tracked down this absolutely beautiful omnibus version of all of Ursula Le Guin's books of Earthsea, with illustrations by Charles Vess, I think an illustrator who really gets the depth of the work. And absolutely phenomenal, this book, and I'm really looking forward to diving into it. And yeah, I think that finally, this was just published a couple years ago, but finally there is a version of the Earthsea books that live up to the content. So very excited to read through all of this, and that contains all of the Earthsea stories and books.
So when I was ordering Hamnet, I decided that I would also order another book that for at least for me, all I could find this cover was by buying it also from the UK, because it is a vintage classic and it's part of their Vintage Japan series. And this book is The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yōko Ogawa. And again, when I tried to look to find it in Canada, the covers were not good. They had like an overly sentimental quality or something, but I thought this cover was so beautiful, and I didn't really know much about the book, but I subscribed to the Vintage Classics, their e-newsletter, and when they announced it, I was just like looking at all the covers and the books, and this one just really struck me, and so I bought it, and I'm so happy I bought this book, not only because I think that it's really beautiful, and just show you the inside cover a bit too, and it's baseballs, and it makes sense when you read the story why it would have baseballs, but it's such a beautiful book. I loved it, and you can attest to it, because while I was reading it, it was one of those books where I just couldn't help but like tell the closest person to me what was happening, and I just think it's really beautifully written and translated, and it tells the story of a housekeeper who's hired to help keep the house of this professor who was in a really bad car accident, and he's lost all, like, his short-term memory only works for this really brief moments in time throughout the day, and so he has this internal clock that after this certain amount of time he forgets what happened just previously. So he has these little tags that he keeps on his suit so that he can at least remember important information. But what's really beautiful about this book is it's then about the relationship between the housekeeper and her son, who the professor calls Root. And even though his memory has to keep resetting, they still have this really beautiful relationship that is formed, and with the understanding for Root and the housekeeper that the professor is going to constantly be forgetting things. And I thought it was just a really beautiful meditation on memory, time, and patience. I think it's a book that a lot of people could get a lot from now, because when people age or they have any sort of cognitive issue, especially when it's having to do with their memory and how do you approach that, and just the patience that the housekeeper and her son show the professor, it's really beautiful. And then, but it's still a relationship that really gives both ways, because the professor is a mathematical genius, and so that plays into it as well. And he has just this beautiful relationship with numbers that I wish I had met someone when I was younger, when I was like taking math classes, approached numbers and the beauty of numbers in the same way as this man did, because all my math teachers, it was like a slog for them to teach us, and then that just came across in the field of math. And anyways, I just really loved this book and was so happy that this beautiful cover attracted me to it and I was able to read it. So highly recommend The Housekeeper and the Professor, and if you can, finding this really lovely cover.
So next up, this is kind of similar to A Wizard of Earthsea in that this is a book, it's called The Once and Future King by T.H. White, that is kind of often marketed towards children, but it's another one of those, kind of timeless all ages books. And I'm really glad that Harper Voyager released this really beautiful cover of this book. And it is, of course, a retelling of the Arthurian legends from T.H. White's really unique point of view. And yeah, I'm really happy. I wanted a copy of this book again, but it often has either bad covers or not all the stories are together in one place, because parts of it are often anthologized separately. So this is the complete Once and Future King, and love this cover. And of course this segues nicely into H is for Hawk. I don't know if you've read this book, but it references T.H. White quite a bit, and it looks into his biography. And here's another book that absolutely iconic cover art,
yes.
And a fantastic nonfiction book about a woman and her relationship with a hawk. But I think it became a runaway bestseller in the UK and then internationally. But I think, a lot of that has to do with the marketing of this book and the fact that right out of the gate, this was a really iconic cover. So I think cover art matters. It really does, especially when people are wanting to have book collections of their own, and I'm glad that publishers have caught up with the fact that people like physical books as collector's objects, and they're really stepping up their game in terms of cover art. And we're going to continue to explore judging books by their covers in future episodes. So that's what we have for right now.
I just wanted to add, I actually pre-ordered Helen Macdonald's next book that's coming out in just very shortly in this month of August, and it definitely has the same artist doing the cover, so it has a very similar look, and I thought that was really smart as well, because then they'll just go really nicely together. So I'm excited to receive that in the mail when it comes out.
I'm sure we'll be talking about that book and other books with beautiful cover art in future episodes. So thanks for watching, keep well, and keep reading.
Bye!